So before we move on with the podcast, it's worth noting none of us are professionals. Some of us have studied psychology in sort of different levels of depth. But before we do share this podcast, we are going to be sending it off to a professional who knows what they're talking about, just to make sure that everything we're sending out and everything we're saying here is positive, is productive, and is a good part of the dialogue and is actually accomplishing what we want it to. So just in case people are worried about like just 4 people who don't know anything about the subject, not only are we knowledgeable, but just in case you weren't, or just in case we weren't, or you weren't confident in our ability to cover this topic maturely, we're also sending it off to an expert before this goes out, just to make sure that anything that could potentially be damaging does not make it a part of it.
Hello and welcome to quite a unique podcast that we have decided to do based on mental health. Now, recently there have been some quite upsetting news in our community, and that's really raised the issue of how important mental health is for all of us, and hopefully by talking about it today, we're able to reduce the stigma around it by sharing our personal experiences and encourage people to be open about their issues and get the help that they need. Now, we're not experts, but we are quite knowledgeable in the area because we've gone through it ourselves. We've taken the help needed at some time, and hopefully you guys will be able to benefit from us sharing our experiences. And we're very lucky today because we are with 3 of the biggest RuneScape content creators, Maikeru, TheRSGuy, and Kashstack. It's very kind of them to take their time to share their experiences with all of us, and hopefully once you see these guys talking about it, you guys will feel comfortable to share as well. So, welcome, guys. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, guys. Thanks again for coming here. Hopefully, this will make a really big difference to a lot of people. But first of all, let's just start with a very open question. Maikeru, if you go first, what does mental health mean to you?
Oh, that's such a hard question, to be fair. Honestly, it's obviously your well-being in your mind, right? So something as simple as getting up in the morning links into your mental health. If you don't want to get up in the morning, that can be an issue. So mental health is being in a positive mindset, in my opinion, when you have good mental health.
Gotcha. Ryan?
To me, I mean, mental health is pretty much everything. It's how you view everything going on in the world around you and how you internally interpret that and then the effect it has on your overall life. So to me, it's extremely important. And it's, it's the little things like what Maikeru was saying, getting out of bed in the morning, but it's also just how you process anything going on in your life. And I think a lot of the time people don't talk about it or look at it quite as much because it happens behind the scenes. It's very internal. There are a lot of people where you'd have no idea that they, struggle with mental health, as opposed to something physical where it's like, oh, I broke my arm. You can visibly see that. But sometimes the effect of mental things can be, equally dramatic and equally, changing to someone's life, if not even more so.
Gotcha. Very good points.
That's a better answer than mine. Yes, there's that.
But it's the way you view it, right? Different people view mental health in different ways, right? And that's why it's quite unique for everyone. So there is no wrong answer. But Ryan's point about not being able to see it, I think that's pretty key here, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, do you?
That's the thing, because there's a lot of things that people have. Everyone has a story, but you might not know their story, right? But everyone has had something or other, and obviously us lot here, we have our own stories, and some people might think, oh, they're streamers, they're always happy, but there's more to it than meets the eye behind the scenes, like Ryan said, the invisible side.
Exactly. I completely agree with everything you guys have said. Mr. Kashstack, what about you? What does mental health mean to you?
I literally don't think I could say anything that would beat what Ryan said. Everything he said is basically what I would have said, but worded better, and I just don't think I really need to input on that anymore.
Okay, that's fine. That's brilliant. I think that's a really good start. For me, mental health is just how you view the world personally and how your state of mind is at any given point in time. For me, I don't think it's something which is a permanent state. I think it's something that changes over time, and given, different environmental circumstances, different personal circumstances, it's something which, we need to be aware of, and we need to be self-aware as well of how we are dealing and coping with things, but also hopefully this podcast will make us aware of other people's state of mind as well. And it's really important to just realize that, sometimes things aren't always as they seem.
Yeah, I think that's a really big one. It's just like as content creators, I think, we get to pick what we share and what we don't share. And, it's great to be open and talk about these things, but also, for me personally, if I'm a streamer and I'm trying to, have a good stream and create a welcoming community where everyone watching is, enjoying themselves, and I don't want to put strain on other people, there are times when, there are things that I definitely will not talk about. And then that can be potentially damaging, because then people could look at my stream, for example, and be like, there's no way Ryan goes through any mental health difficulties. And then when they're going through something difficult, they might think, well, that's strange. This is abnormal, because clearly these other people who are around in the community aren't experiencing the same thing, when in reality, that may not be the case. And I think that sort of circles back to what Rav said, and why, doing this is important. And it's good to, share our stories, talk about it, and just get an open dialogue started.
Okay, perfect. So like Ryan said, hopefully this podcast will encourage a conversation, because as streamers, these guys have to put up a front to entertain people, and if they're not feeling their best, they have to pipe themselves up anyway, and that may result in people thinking that, they don't have any problems. But as Maikeru said, everyone has their own journey, everyone has their problems, and just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. And talking about it is a major key. So I think that was a pretty solid introduction from you guys, so thank you very much for that. So now we know what this podcast is about, I think it's important to kind of set the scene as to why mental health is so important. And I'm just going to bring up a few stats here which kind of put into perspective how many people are dealing with mental health related issues. So in the UK, for example, 16 million out of 65 million people experience mental illness. That is an extraordinary amount. Around 1 in 5 people are facing this. So even though you may not be able to see it with people directly, there is definitely a large amount of people who are having trouble dealing with issues and who need to be getting help. Next up is quite important to us because we are quite young, mostly. 75% of young people don't get help for their problems. And this is because we feel like there is a stigma around talking about mental health. And sadly, amongst 3/4 of suicides in the UK are all male. Now, why this is important to bring up is because the stigma around men talking about how they feel is something which is attributes to this statistic, and as a result is causing so many deaths which don't need to happen. So even in 2020, more than half of young people now feel embarrassed to talk about mental health. We definitely have moved in a positive way from around a few years ago, but if so many people are facing these issues and only half of them are talking about it, we definitely have a very long way to go. Now, specifically for our population, people who like to play games a lot, it has been found that extensive gaming has led to low self-esteem, a preference for solitude, and has resulted in a lot of negative emotions which cause such mental health problems, such as anger, fear, and disgust. And a lot of the time we use games to cope with issues that we don't want to address directly, and as a result, they are left to fester and grow. So this is why we need to talk about this. These stats really don't lie. Lots of people have these issues, and currently no one is talking, well, we're not talking about it as much as we should. So yeah, guys, what do you think about those stats?
I think they paint a very clear picture of something that clearly it's trending in the right direction from where it was even a couple years ago, but it's not where it needs to be yet. When you're seeing things like half of young people feel embarrassed to talk about their mental health. And it makes sense because there's a stigma around it. And, being mentally ill could be seen as being mentally weak. And I think that's why it's so important that, you have, leaders in the community coming up and talking about it and actually, starting a discussion about it. Specifically to gaming, it's the same thing as well, where it is used by a lot of people as a coping mechanism or a coping strategy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, so long as there are other, steps and measures being taken to tackle what's really going on, either in the background or in the forefront. Exactly.
I completely agree with that. Gaming is not bad, but this is a dark side of gaming which people could face if they aren't taking care of themselves, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And the whole stigma, it is a big thing, and people don't want to be labelled. That's a big part, because, someone will be like, oh, I don't feel good. They just put it down to not feeling good. They don't want to label it as something like depression, right? Because then they feel that stigma around it of them not being the same as other people. And then that's then leading for people not coming out and, getting worse and worse and not seeking the help that they actually need.
Gotcha. And in terms of feeling labeled by it, can you guys relate to that? Because personally, when I was depressed, it took me a long time to kind of get to terms with the fact that, I actually had a problem which needed to be dealt with. And, that stigma, I'm not proud of it, but it did kind of hold me back from getting the help I needed in that time. Do you guys relate to that as well?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I definitely developed, so I've got an anxiety disorder. We'll talk about it later, I'm sure. But, I definitely had it from a young age, probably 9th, 10th, or 11th grade in school. And I did not approach getting help because of the idea of sort of being put into a category. I didn't like that idea. And I did not get any form of help until second or third year university.
Gotcha.
Which is
so
years.
Just a quick question there, Ryan. When you said that you don't want to be put in a category, were you worried about how you would view yourself in that situation, or how others would view you?
I wasn't as worried about other people because it's something that I can, share to those who I think, would be okay hearing that. And I didn't think I'd be judged by others. But for myself, everyone's got an idea of who they are as a person, what they are as a person. And my self-identity did not have anxiety disorder in it, or depression, or any of that stuff in it. And the thought of sort of that label changing who I was as a person definitely got in my way a little bit. And having done it now, and also having studied psychology in university, I now sort of I've got a better understanding of how labels work and what they are. And I definitely regret not getting help sooner, because my quality of life would have gone up years before. Labels really, when it comes down to it, if you guys don't mind me getting into them very briefly, they're basically a form of categorization. They don't change who you are as a person or how you should think of yourself. So you could be anxious without having a disorder. The main difference would be the disorder would be anxiety over a significant period of time. So really, when it comes down to it, a label, it's a starting point for further understanding of oneself. So it's definitely not this big negative thing that is sort of all-encompassing. It's just a baseline to say, yes, your symptoms fit into, this large range, but it doesn't make you not an individual who has, a million other things going on in their life, or a million other ways you could categorize yourself.
Gotcha. A very, very nice summary there. And because you guys obviously have large communities yourselves, I presume even I've had people come to me, for example, say and open up being like, I don't feel that good, and it's really not that uncommon for people to reach out to friends, etc., when they are feeling down. And, it kind of really puts into perspective if we talk about the RuneScape community, where people are reaching out to, us, telling us they're not feeling that good. And for example, I know that Maikeru's had a few posts on Reddit, same as Ryan, saying that, the videos that they do have helped entertain people through dark times and stuff. So my question to you guys is, have you guys had people reach out to you to tell you, that they're not feeling 100% and, they need they want to help deal with it or something like that?
Yeah, I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of people that I've obviously become friends with online and through RuneScape specifically. And obviously, I'm no professional. I don't know every ins and outs of all of these different things, but having someone there to just listen and have an ear for your like rant or your opening up or just how you feel is a huge step in the right direction. I think if I didn't have friends when it came to my like depression and stuff, I don't think I would have got the help that I needed, not being able to speak to family, friends, etc., and having people that understand. So I feel like I got a little bit of backlash, I would say, when I posted on Twitter like a month ago, and I said like I'm there if people want to talk to me about issues, and people were saying like, you know, don't be a hero, you're not a professional, things like that. But it wasn't to be a professional, it wasn't to fix their issues, it was just to be a bridge between helping them help themselves. So, you know, if you could talk to someone and, you know, just talk about your feelings and try and narrow it down a little bit, or just find out how you're feeling properly, you can then seek better professional help and more specific to your needs as well, if you actually pinpoint what's happening within yourself, and then they can further do it. So yeah, I personally think chatting to people, I've been able to, you know, just be that ear and help them like I got help when I was in a bad spot. So friends are key. People to talk to, it is a big thing. And I'm very thankful that I had that, and I'm always willing to help others.
That's really good. So I think the key point that you've made there is that there are always people who will listen. You know, like, you may not necessarily know them very well, and this is something which I've found, you know, very pleasantly surprising about our community. There's very little judgment with some people because you don't necessarily know them in real life, and sometimes that makes it easier to open up to people and things like that. But yeah, like Maikeru said, you know, there is always a friendly ear around. They may not necessarily be able to give you the help that you need, but they may help you understand yourself a little bit better. And, you know, that goes a really long way.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And we're also going to be talking later on about just as an individual, as a human being, how can you help? And one of the things we will be looking at later on is just how to be a good listener, how to sort of navigate that line of, you know, talking people through their issues, but without being a professional, especially obviously for those who are not a professional. I think sometimes, and Maikeru was talking about this with his comments of like, don't be a hero. And it's really, he's not trying to be a hero. He's trying to be a friend. He's trying to be a friend who is there for someone who's going through a tough time, who's there to just listen and make that individual feel less alone in their problem that they're dealing with. And a lot of the time that can be a very important, necessary bridge to make someone feel like, hey, I shared this problem, and, you know, those worries I had about it getting out there, you know, none of that came true. This person listened to me. This person was respectful to me. This person was understanding. And that might make that individual more open to actually then going and seeing a professional. So there's never like a judgment call. Like if someone comes to you with information about something they're going through, it's never your job to make a judgment call of like, yeah, I think this person should be going to therapy or whatnot. It's always you help them, you speak to them, you're kind to them. And then at the end of that, it's always a good recommendation no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think it speaks volumes that despite, you know, you two being so busy, and Cash as well, you know, you've always have your DMs open. I think that's pretty special, to be honest, because you're making time for people, you know, who necessarily you don't know, but you're still offering them, you know, the chance to be heard, help them through. So the people who say you're being a hero, I'm sorry, but that's absolutely rubbish, because you're helping people at the end of the day. And if you're helping people get through this stuff, then, you know, that's great. And there's absolutely no shame in that. And, you know, if you are approached by someone, this is something which, you know, I probably want to mention now, even if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, just let them know that, you know, they're not alone. And if you can't help them directly, maybe, you know, guide them to someone who can, maybe a mutual friend or something like that. And obviously treat their information with like the utmost respect. If it's confidential, make it stay confidential. But, you know, even just listening to someone like these guys have mentioned that they've done, it makes the world of difference. And we're talking from personal experience here.
And you make a good point there where you're talking about how some of us have our DMs open all the time. And that's something that I think is not something that everyone is going to do. And I think there's nothing wrong with keeping them open or closed. But for me, I know what it's like to feel absolutely alone and feel like I don't have a lot of friends or a lot of people to open up to. And at a time of my life when I was in the middle of that and feeling like I had nobody to go to, something I did is I watched a lot of YouTubers, content creators, streamers, and those streamers became my friends. They maybe didn't know me, but I knew them very well. And there was, it was a sort of a friend relationship. And in keeping our DMs open, it's not, to try and solve people's problems or provide them bootleg psychological assistance. It's just so that if anyone wants a friend or someone to lean on or someone who they know is not going to react negatively to what they have to say, that's available to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question which I have before we move on, let's talk about gaming specifically, because this is something which I've experienced quite a lot personally, is I found that if I just focus on playing games, for days on end, etc., I really do get myself down, and that's really not healthy for me. And it took me time to kind of realize how much that was affecting me negatively. But, kind of that realization that there is a balance to everything, it made a big impact on my life in terms of just, focusing and prioritizing the right things. Is that something that you guys have experienced as well?
It's kind of different for me. Gaming is pretty much my escape from everything. Because when I'm playing games, I'm always online with my friends. My friends are always there to talk to me. It's better when I'm sat there playing with other people rather than sat there on my own, which is why I like to stream, is because there's plenty of people in chat there to keep you company, keep you busy, keep you active and talking all the time. And it just, I don't really like socializing. I'm a very uncomfortable person, but also working as well has helped me out. Like finding a job and interacting with people outside as well also helps. But I feel like gaming for me was the better escape, because I'm a lot better at gaming than I am at socializing with people in person, and it's just more comfortable because sitting behind a camera, there's no face-to-face interaction. I can just be myself. I don't have to be awkward, and it just helps a lot more knowing that there's people online there to help you, like your friends. And IRL, I didn't really have that many friends. I only had a couple. And we didn't really spend that much time together unless it was over the internet. But it's all so much easier through gaming, and I just feel much more comfortable whilst playing games.
Completely understand. So I think Cash raises a pretty good point. Something I mentioned earlier. Do you think it's easier to open up to people you've met online than it is to perhaps people you know in your friendship group?
It depends how well you know the person. I've been told a few times that I don't seem like a very approachable person through streaming because of how I am on stream. Like, everyone said that I always seem like a very angry person. And that's because sometimes it gets frustrating, it gets a bit too much, and I just get really angry. But the people that do know me know that they can talk to me all the time, and that I'm a good listener, I'm very polite sometimes. And it is a lot easier to open up to people. Like, typing, I feel, is a lot easier to get your point across to somebody rather than like talking face to face or even on voice chat. I just feel more comfortable if I'm like talking to someone via text. It's a lot easier because I can word things better when it's through text.
Yeah.
And you can take as long as you want to reply. People know that that you've got the message. And you don't have to stumble over your words and stuff like that. You can take your time to reply.
I think it really depends on the person and sort of how you like to socialize or not socialize. But I think Cash brings up a really good point there too. Just being able to, take some time and then really think about what you're trying to say and type it out and not have any sort of time crunch or rush, I think is very helpful for a lot of people, especially if you're sort of going into uncharted territory where you're looking into your own psyche and trying to figure out what's going on and you're not really sure, you're looking for answers. I think being able to take your time and make sure that you're, putting things out exactly how you want to, it's a little less stressful than, I don't know, going into a conversation one-on-one where that individual you're talking to might be asking you questions and you don't know how to answer. And then all of a sudden it gets overwhelming. But it really depends on the person. I also know people who much prefer like, hey, I don't want to DM you. Can you call me? And, that's totally fine too. It's very personally dependent.
Gotcha. All very, very good points there. But so far, I think what we can establish is that if you are going through something, firstly, there will be someone there that you can reach out to. And secondly, you're not alone, because a lot of people, including all of us, have their own issues that they're dealing with. So, if you think for a second that it makes you stand out in a bad way, it doesn't, So really don't let that hamper you from, talking to people or actually dealing with any issues which you may have. So the next part of our little conversation here, I think this is probably going to be the most important part, is that we're going to share our stories about, our mental health issues and, perhaps how we dealt with them and things like that. So just to break the ice, I don't mind going first. So when I was doing my master's, I broke my arm in the very beginning of the term. And as a result of that, I was staying at home, I couldn't travel much, and, I missed a lot of school, etc. And that brought up a lot of pent-up issues because I had lots of time to think from my past. And, it really, really got me down. Big time. And my mum, I'm pretty lucky to have my mum. She's a psychiatrist, and she saw that I was depressed, but I didn't want to kind of have that label on me. I didn't want to believe that, I was in that situation. So I delayed kind of dealing with it for a very, very long time. But after a while, I started to accept that, there was something wrong, and that was through my mum pushing me. And as a result of that, I decided that perhaps I should go to a therapist. So I started going to a therapist, discussing my issues, what was getting me down and things like that. And that really, really helped me. And, for a while, I made a lot of progress. I was becoming a lot better. I managed to, get a good grade in my master's. But that was all really good. And, things were going well. But one thing which I want to mention was quite important for me was to realize that this is something which is work in progress for me. I think it will always be kind of an underlying thing I need to be aware of. And so that means I need to continuously work on myself in order to get to a good mental health state. So if I don't do the things which help me for a certain amount of time, I'm probably likely to slide back. So for me, doing things like, going outside, socializing, meditating, working out, they're all super important. But sadly for me, as you guys know in the chat, my grandfather passed away last year, September, and that really brought me crashing down a lot, and it really, really hurt me. And I was going through probably the worst phase of my life. It became really hard to deal with everything, and I was regressing so much, and I was becoming a horrible, horrible person just because I wasn't able to deal with myself, and I really hated myself at the time. But then, I started talking to people. I know in the chat, for example, Maikeru and Cash really helped me. Just, to name a few, I started talking to them. I told them, look, if I'm behaving this way, I'm really sorry, but, I'm dealing with this. And they just said, look, don't worry about it. Deal with yourself. We're here for you. And just having, people like them to listen really kind of brought me back and, kind of brought my feet back on the ground. It helped me love myself again and help me deal with it. And, since then I've been taking my medication and gradually getting better. What I found was that gaming really did impact me negatively because I did it for a long time on end to kind of deal with the situation. So I kind of limited that in my life, and that really affected me. I continued to go to therapy. I had a very loving family around me, and I had some wonderful friends to talk through. So that kind of really helped me get through that. And, as a result, I'm much happier today. I know myself a lot better. I am very aware of mental health with others as well. So I'm always there to speak to someone. So if anyone ever wants to talk, no matter what, just drop me a DM. I'll try my best to kind of help. But yeah, that's my story. It really did impact me negatively. And, I was turning into someone I really didn't like. So, I'm glad I dealt with it eventually. My biggest regret was not dealing with it sooner. Because if I dealt with it sooner, then, perhaps I wouldn't have had to kind of go through the extreme lows that I did do. But yeah, that's my story. And, I'm very grateful to people like Cash and Mike, who I just spoke to, and just having them listen and be like, look, it's going to be okay. That really helped me. So yeah, that's my story. Kind of hard to talk about, but yeah.
I think that's the thing, right? It's always hard to talk about your experiences, but it's nice to speak about them, even if the people that are listening aren't going through the same thing, like the exact same thing kind of thing, but they can relate, or they just know that they're not alone. It's a good thing to just share your story sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely not alone. Like, people have felt like that before, and they have come through a lot stronger because of it. And, that's because they worked on themselves. They knew that, there was something wrong, and then they faced it. So, yeah.
Exactly.
So what really helped me was just taking a step back from everything and just kind of not unloading on people, but just having them understand me better, just understand how I was feeling. That meant a lot to me personally. So that's something which I think, if you are going through something similar, then perhaps you might want to consider talking to someone who won't judge you and will just be able to listen.
Yeah, that was a personal thing that helped me as well, having people to listen to me, to put me in the right direction, then seek extra help. So obviously before I started speaking to people and stuff, I was going through some interesting stuff. I used to work as a teacher. I used to help kids with special educational needs, and it was quite a fulfilling job, but also quite strenuous and stressful, because obviously you're helping kids and they have their own issues that you need to help them through. And then if you're dealing with your issues at the same time, it can be hard to help others if you can't help yourself, I guess is a nice way to say it. But I didn't realize that I was going through certain things at the time, and I was struggling with certain things as simple as motivating myself to get up and do stuff, because motivating myself to actually get out of bed was a challenge at some points. And I just thought I was being lazy or being sad, but it was more because it was actual depression, right? But you don't want to label yourself, so you're getting on with it, you're getting on with your daily life. And then it got worse and worse until the point where I had a bit of a meltdown and stuff. But I had family that my mum specifically pushed me to go seek some help and such, so I did that. They put me on medication, and they also told me to, be a bit more active and go outside and stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of just kept doing what I was doing, but taking this medication as well. And it didn't really help. Obviously, everyone's different, so the medication not helping me doesn't mean that it won't help others, because Rav's helped him. But it kind of made me where I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad. I just didn't really have any emotion when I was taking the medication. So I lost the whole feeling sad, but then I also lost feeling happy, and it affected me even worse. So I ended up speaking to some professionals and stuff, and I weaned myself off of the medication and worked on other ways to improve myself. And I'd stopped being a teacher at this point and went full-time content creation, which meant I wasn't getting outside very often. So I was sitting in my room, I was streaming, I was making videos, and I was doing all of these things on my computer for pretty much all of my day. So I wasn't going outside, I wasn't socializing, I wasn't getting any, even sunlight. It's a big thing. So the way that I got myself out of my rut is I gave myself a routine. Routine was big for me. And obviously I was talking to people and getting professional help at the same time, and they were helping me with these things. So I didn't do this on my own. This is something that I had help to do, and it took me a while to get it all up and running. But I finally got myself a routine that helped a lot. So I wasn't staying in bed till like 4 p.m. Because that never helps, because you'd wake up and there was no sunlight, and then you just want to sleep again because you can't be bothered, or you're sad when you wake up because you're not in the good mood because you don't even see the sun, you don't even rise and shine as such. So I got up earlier, I went outside, I saw the sun, I got the vitamin D, I got a routine going, and that really helped me with just feeling a bit happier in myself. Then I pushed forward with that and kept to this routine, and then streams helped me a ton as well. Cash spoke about it earlier, and he said that he likes streams because it has people to engage with and people to talk to. And people think that I stream to entertain others, but really it's people entertaining me, as silly as that sounds. It helped me a lot. My Hoover's going off in the background, sorry if that's loud. But yeah, streaming helped me a ton because I was able to interact with people and socialize. Then I was also getting out, playing Pokemon Go and some other stuff like that has really helped me, because it gets me out and I'm enjoying being out, and I don't mind staying out for a while if I'm playing a video game on my phone. And then I'd also socialize, do stuff in the game with other people from my area, my brother, my friends, and even new people from like a Discord that I have. So all of these different things all went in together to just, I don't know, I feel so much better nowadays. I wake up, I don't feel like I need to stay in bed, and I have a reason to go outside. I have a reason to, just go on my computer and socialize with the streams and stuff. And I know I'm rambling a lot, but yeah, that's really helped me, and that's personally how I got through it. Obviously, everyone's different, like I said, but that's my story, and obviously there's more to it. I didn't want to go too much into the depression side of things, but yeah, when it gets to the point where you don't even want to wake up and you just want to sleep all the time, obviously there's an issue, but I didn't want to tell myself there was an issue. And when I finally got help, it was clear to see, right?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. And, like you said, everyone is different, and it makes a huge difference, right, in terms of the type of help you get. One thing which you mentioned was, you started to work on yourself. What was it that kind of was the catalyst to be like, okay, look, I have to be honest with myself here? What made you change from thinking it's not a problem to it is a problem?
I had somewhat of a breakdown at one point where, I wasn't really getting up and I wasn't really doing anything productive, and my days consisted of sleeping and then computer, and that was literally it. And lots of people would try and talk to me. I'd be moody and not very pleasant to deal with. And I snapped at one point and got, a huge breakdown. And at that point, I knew within myself that there wasn't something correct, and it wasn't right. So I went to the doctors originally, and then they referred me elsewhere, and that's where everything started rolling.
Gotcha. So yeah, pretty powerful story there, even though, it's different. But one thing which, you said is that you started to get help. After you started to get the help, how long did it take for you to feel better? Because I think people listening may not realize that, it is something which you can notice relatively soon if you start to work on yourself. Well, it was for me anyway.
Yeah, I started feeling a bit strange on the medication, and I didn't really change my routine. So that didn't really change much for me. So I knew that there was more to do. Then after that, and once I started getting the routine, started going outside and doing things like that, I'd say it took me probably about a month. And then I started feeling a bit more myself, and then it just kept progressing from there on.
Yeah, good to hear. And now, would you say that you are a well-rounded, happier Maikeru as compared to then? One thing which I find is that I can't even compare as to how I felt back when I was low, because it just seems like a different person, and I'm just happy that to kind of work through it. I've worked through it. Do you feel the same in terms of, do you feel like you can't recognize yourself if you were to look back then?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I also very much reflect with the whole thing that you said where you wish you got help sooner. That's a big thing as well. I think a lot of people are the same. It is that stigma around it. You don't want to label yourself. So I definitely left it too long, just like you did. So yeah, I just feel so much better in myself.
That's so good to hear, man. Honestly, thank you so much for sharing that. It does mean a lot, and hopefully people will see the biggest RuneScape 3 YouTuber talk about it, and they'll feel comfortable to share their story or get the help that they need. So thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Yeah, anytime.
Cool. Cash, Ryan, anything to say, or do you want to go to your bit?
Just everyone's stories are so unique, and I think it's it's a good way to outline how different people are. Like Maikeru even mentioned things that he experienced, and you said it too, it's starting to work right away. And when I get into my story, it was not like that at all. But it's just really good to understand how dynamic, the human being can be, and why getting professional proper help is so important, because you don't know what's going to work for you. And a professional whose job is to understand the human psyche may be able to get to the root of it a lot quicker than you would on your own.
Yeah, they've dealt with people
100%.
like you before, right? So they know what works, and they know what doesn't necessarily work. So yeah, I completely agree. Taking that helping hand, it's a big deal, because like Ryan mentioned in the very beginning, is if you break your arm, you go and get a cast for it. If you're feeling low, you need to go and deal with that in one way or another. You can get the help because it's there, and there's absolutely no shame in doing that.
To take that analogy a step further, if you were to break your arm, you probably wouldn't be able to cast it by yourself. You'd probably have a doctor do that, because the doctor knows how.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Very well said. Very well said. Cool. Cash, Ryan, do you guys want to go? I don't know.
Cash, what are you thinking?
I'm gonna throw you under the bus, dude.
You're throwing me under the RS bus?
Yeah.
All right. Oh boy. Okay, so I might stumble a bit here, because this is a story that I have never once told in full. But I used to get stressed out with test taking in school. So in grades 9 and 10, I was at a pretty relaxed school where I was getting good grades. I wasn't working hard, and my parents kind of saw that and were like, no, he's just coasting right now. So I ended up getting put into a different school in the 11th grade. So for my last 2 years of high school, and it was a very intensive, very active, very sort of terror instilling experience for me, because all my friends got ripped away. And then at the same time, all of a sudden, school was this super serious thing where institutionally a big part of it was, to remind the students frequently of how much was at stake. And for me, I'm always better relaxed. I'm going to perform better at anything if I can relax and tell myself it's not the end of the world and do the very best I can. And it kind of uprooted that. And then as soon as I started the 11th grade, that was where I would start getting test-taking anxiety that also led to insomnia. So for the final 2 years of high school, I never once actually was able to sleep the night before a test or an exam. And it got to the point where I was pulling double all-nighters, not to study, but just because I could not sleep. And throughout all of this, I still didn't do a lot. I didn't recognize that there was a problem. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew something around tests would get me to the point where I could not function as a human being. And it was even a physical feeling. I used to run a lot of races, cross country, track and field. And it's kind of like that feeling right before the race starts when you're waiting for them to shoot the gun and then you're ready to go. But it was that sort of full body feeling. It would just never go away. So in the 12th grade, I saw a psychologist, but it was not a very good experience. In one session, we didn't get along. And at that point I thought, well, psychologist, clearly that's not the problem, because that didn't work out. And that is a huge mistake that we'll get back to a little later on in my experience. But just one negative experience made me think, well, there's nothing more here, and we're gonna, move on to something else. So I ended up going to university in the exact same state, but in university, there's a similar amount of stress to in high school for me anyway. It was the same thing around exam season, where I would get to the point, or even with assignments or midterms, where I just wasn't sleeping. So I remember there were days where I had a 7 p.m. psychology lecture, 7 o'clock at night. And there were times when I would actually sleep through it because I would sleep the entire day after being up the entire night. And I just could not, break that schedule. And interestingly enough for me, I still did not, go and seek help or talk to a professional or do any of that stuff because I just didn't want to deal with anything, and I didn't feel equipped to deal with it either. It felt like, this is me, this is my life, this is how it's supposed to be. And the thing that actually made the biggest difference for getting out of sort of that crazy opposite reverse schedule was actually streaming. So I got into, and we talked about routines, and Maikeru talked about it as well. I used to, and I still do to this day, the first thing I do when I wake up is I wake up and I start my stream right away. And that prevents me from staying in bed all day and then staying up all night and everything getting out of whack. It gave me something to get up and get out of bed and do. And it's something that, is very therapeutic for me personally, just to get to interact with people, chat with people. It's not the same as going outside and interacting with people in person, but it's a lot different from being completely in isolation. So anyway, that's one thing for me that made a very big difference. But at this point, I'm still not getting professional help. That all changed in my fourth year of university, right around exam season. I just, without getting into extreme details, things got to a bit of a peak for me where I knew I could not continue on with the current state of sort of my life, where everything was just out of whack, out of control. I was not happy with it or myself. And I went to see a psychiatrist because in Canada, a psychiatrist is covered. Those are the individuals that can prescribe medication, whereas a psychologist, that is not covered. So as a student, went to see a psychiatrist. So I ended up on medication, and I actually found the medication to be relatively effective. It didn't make anything go away, but it took the edge off to the point where I was actually able to sit down and study without, let's say, having a panic attack or anything like that. And it helped my sleep a little bit as well. So it wasn't a cure for everything, but it took the edge off and it allowed me to complete school. And, have a varying degree of success there. Now, throughout this whole time, I was also in a relationship, and it wasn't a particularly healthy relationship. With no details being given, of course. My self-esteem and my self-confidence were extremely low. And I knew sort of heading into RuneFest of last year that I could not continue the way it was going. I knew it wasn't fair to myself. So I pulled the plug on the relationship, and that's when things got pretty crazy for me because my girlfriend at the time, she was the person who I told everything to. She was there for me through literally everything, being stressed about exams, Twitch partnership, anything that I'd been through, we'd really been through together. And it really felt like the rug was just swiped out from under me. And I was completely overwhelmed. And as a result of that, that's when I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this right. So I went online. I found a psychologist I could go to for proper therapy. And I went in. And I went in knowing that the last time I'd seen a psychologist, it did not help at all. So this time, instead of looking for instant results, I said, you know what? It's not the end of the world financially. I'm going to do it. I'm going to commit to, let's say, 10 sessions. And if at the end of that, nothing is different, then I'll go look somewhere else. And it actually took 6 or 7 sessions before I started feeling remotely better about sort of me as a person, my relationship, any of that stuff. And now I'm still going today. And this was 3-4 months ago that I started, because even though I got past all of the relationship stuff, I got over that probably in, a couple months. I was at a point where I was able to, open up and talk about the other things in my life, the underlying things that, I maybe wasn't happy with, start to work on the self-esteem stuff, start to work on, everything else that was also there through everything that in the past I'd sort of just swept under the rug and said, it's fine. This is just who I am. So yeah, I'm still in therapy to this day. I actually got off the meds that I was put on in 4th year, and that actually went very well for me. Medication is great, but I got on them for specifically exams. I am no longer a student, so I didn't need them anymore. And one thing I will say is it's very much a work in progress. I think sometimes people like to look in absolutes, like I am mentally not well or I am mentally well. And I think really it's a continuum where there are times when, yeah, you'll be great in general and have a not so good day. There will be times where you're in the worst state of your life, and there's no like, I'm now cured of my mental health. I'm perfect now. We're good. Don't need to worry about it. I think it's always something that, for me in particular, and I think for a lot of people too, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be present. It's always going to require sort of catering to and working on. So yeah, that's sort of the gist of my story. If you guys have any questions about it, you're welcome to ask that too. But yeah, that's sort of my sort of journey with mental health. And one big regret I have, and it's the same one that Maikeru shared and the same one that Rav shared as well, which was just I should have gotten help much earlier, and it would have greatly increased or improved my quality of life up to present. But still, either way, I'm very thankful that I did do that, because especially with me, and I'm a very anxious person, there was this whole stigma around talking about it or getting help, or I just didn't want to feel like that was a part of my identity. And in delaying it, it made everything so much worse. And now I'm actually learning the tools that I need to, not have someone else fight my demons for me, but for me to be able to reconcile them and work on them by myself. And that's really what, to me, therapy is in general, is it's teaching you life skills. And that's something that I'm a strong advocate for, just because of how helpful it has been for me personally.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I will just quickly comment on that briefly. It's kind of surprised me to some extent, because you know how we were saying earlier, where you look at people when they stream and you think, oh, there can't be anything wrong with this person, or they're perfectly fine and whatnot. And it's crazy to think that obviously you see you stream and you're like having fun and you're always interacting and you look super confident, but then deep down and under the surface there's all that anxiety and stuff. So I find stuff like that super interesting, because it's crazy to think that one thing on stream can mean something completely different in person. So thank you for sharing that, for sure, because for me that's definitely saying I don't see that side of you, kind of thing.
I think that's why it's like important to do this in general. Just I realized a couple months back that I've been through a lot of mental health stuff in the last little bit. I've gone through my own things there, but in not talking about them, it's not doing a disservice, but it's almost doing a disservice, because people's assumption of what my life is like is different from what it actually is. So that's why I'm so glad, I'm so happy that I was invited on to talk about it, and I've started talking about it more sort of in my own videos and in my streams as well, just because I don't want anybody to think that I'm a perfect person from a mental standpoint. And it's very much something that I think not only I am working on, but it's important to work on.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. I appreciate
Ryan,
that.
thank you so much for sharing that. And one thing which I relate to quite a lot is that you said, for you it's a work in progress. For me, it's a work in progress. It will probably never ever be 100%, but it will always be there in the back of my mind. And what therapy kind of helped me personally do was learn how to deal with it. So if I am falling a bit low, I know what I need to do to kind of get better. So that is one thing which, for sure makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that as well, because obviously I'm not just completely fixed of depression and stuff. I have days where I don't want to get up. I have days where I lay in bed way too long. But now I know that, I should get up. I should go outside. I'm going to feel better if I do that. The things that you've learned, the things that you've come across that have worked for you in therapy or in whatever you've done, you can now put them to work when you have one of those days. It's definitely helpful.
Exactly. One other really interesting point which you made, Ryan, was that your medication wasn't permanent. You took it to help deal with your issues at the time. It enabled you to kind of improve yourself and deal with what you needed to, and now you're off it, right? So that's one misconception I think people have, is that if you do take medication, it's not necessarily for the long-term basis. It could just be temporary to kind of help you do what you need to kind of get better currently.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. and I just really don't like. I find with the people I've spoken to, a lot of people are so against taking medication, and if you've tried it and it doesn't work for you and it has negative impact on you, I am 100% with you. Don't continue with it. But it may just help you in the short term kind of deal with things. So personally, I would recommend to try it and try all sorts of help which is available to you, because getting better, it may come as a result of that. It may not, but what's the harm in trying? So that's my kind of viewpoint.
For sure. And like for me personally, the medication, it took the edge off so that I was able to function as a human being, and also allowed me to, work on myself and end up actually doing something a little more permanent that I was a little happier with. And I think, without the medication, I probably would have ended up dropping out of school, for example, things like that just would have negatively impacted me, even further. I definitely think there are a lot of sort of controversial takes around medication, and really it's a treatment option that exists. It's never a bad thing to try. If a medical professional thinks that it would benefit you, it's not a bad thing to try. And also remember, the choice is always yours too. So, for example, when I got on this medication, I was told most people who get on this stay on it for a good chunk of their life. And, when I got on them, I was expecting to take them forever, but I made a decision and I talked about it with a medical professional. I said, look, I'm thinking of getting off this because there are side effects, and I think while I'm still in therapy, I don't think I need them anymore. And that's completely, with advice from a medical professional, that is, my decision to make. And I made the choice to get off of them, and it's actually been great for me being off of them. But if it hadn't been, I could have gone right back on them or even tried something else as well.
Yeah, there are lots of alternatives out there. And you mentioned that with your therapist, the first one, you didn't necessarily click, but you did find someone who you did click with. So, there may be people out there who've had similar experiences where their first therapist wasn't really on a level with them, but, there are plenty of therapists out there with different specialities, and CBT, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. There are things like hypnotherapy, etc. There are lots of different treatments which are there to help. And, if you are struggling and you've tried something, don't let it deter you from trying something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. I really think, the two of your stories will make a big difference in our community for sure.
No worries.
Cash, do you want to go ahead?
Oh boy, here we go. Right. Well, I've pretty much wrote all mine down, so it's easy for me to read. So I'm just going to start from the beginning of where it happened. So basically, a few people know that I was in a really long relationship and I ended up getting married. But basically, about 9 years ago, I got in a relationship. Everything seemed fine. Nothing had changed as it was. Everything just seemed normal. A year down the line, I started to leave the house less and less. I didn't socialize as much. My friends realized it was a lot more difficult to get me out of the house. But besides that, that's all that had changed. Nothing else had happened but from me just leaving the house. About halfway into the relationship, I pretty much lost all my friends. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I didn't socialize, and the only time I was allowed to leave the house was to go to school and college. And this was because she didn't trust me whatsoever. And I don't know what I did to not have any trust, but she just didn't trust me, and she just refused to allow me to leave the house or socialize. I rely on my parents a lot, and I spoke to them all the time, every day. And because of this, I started to speak to them less and less because I was always locked up in my room. And it was just horrible because I never got to see my parents half the time. The only time I get to see them is if I'm on my way to school, I'm going out for dinner. That's pretty much it. But basically, it hurt me inside having less contact with my family. But because I loved her, I just dealt with it. And she didn't like my family. So I wasn't really allowed to socialize with any of my brothers and sisters, my parents. And it was just horrible, I didn't get to see them like 5 minutes a day, and it was just really, really hard to deal with. But then what happened was, once I finished school and college, I wasn't allowed to get a job because I wasn't allowed to leave the house. So the only time I was able to was to go and claim benefits, which was, I'm not proud to say it, but it does happen. But then they started to do an investigation because she started to live with me, and she had a job, and so I wasn't allowed to claim. Therefore, she would have all the income, and I would have nothing. And at this point in time, I had a fair amount of debt because of loans I took out to purchase things that I needed to survive and stuff like that. And I had a lot of debt, wasn't able to make payments. She refused to help towards my living situations. So at this point, I was in a very dark place. I wasn't able to pay for myself. And at a few points in my life, I thought about taking my own life, and it was horrible. But my parents started to realise that I seemed down all the time, and every time they'd ask me if I was okay, I'd be like, I'm fine, I'm just tired. And, they just didn't ask because they didn't want to push towards anything. But at one point, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I just broke down in front of my parents. And they assured me that everything was fine, and that they were there to support me through everything that was going on. But I didn't tell them anything about what was going on with me and my wife because, I didn't want them to think anything different of her, even though she didn't like them. I still wanted them to like her in a weird way. But yeah, after all that, I started to get back on my feet, work around it, and I started to get somewhere, and I ended up getting a job because I convinced her that I needed to, otherwise it was just going to be horrible. So I got a job, and everything seemed to be getting fine. But as the relationship went on, as all relationships do, everybody has arguments. These things happen. It's not uncommon to have arguments in a relationship. But after all this, we still ended up getting married anyway, and it just started to get worse and worse. But because of how much I loved her, I just dealt with it, went through it all, And in the end, it didn't work out very well. My parents pretty much said to me, well, they didn't force me, they suggested that I moved out so I could start my own family, live my life. Which, at the time, I thought I was going to live with my parents forever. Because, that's just one of those things I didn't really want to have to do, is grow up, have to be an adult. It was just horrible to have to do. But despite all that, we ended up getting a house, and after that, 2 months down the line, everything just fell apart. I just couldn't deal with it anymore, and I pretty much just left. And she wasn't happy with it, and she just tried everything to get me back there, but I wasn't having any of it. I just couldn't deal with it. I needed to get out. My mental health was just terrible. And this is where things started to get worse for me, because I didn't have a place to call home. And I was moving constantly between my parents' house, my sister's house, and my grandma's house. And having to move every month or 2 months was just so stressful. I didn't have a place to call home. And it's just not a nice thing to have to deal with. And to be fair, I'm still not back up my feet. I'll never know if I have to leave or if this is my permanent place now. But it's nice to know that I've got family there to support me through this, and that I've always got someone that I can rely on. If I need a place to go, I've always got that. I know you, Rav, you've suggested that if I need to get away or things aren't right, I can come chill with you for a bit, which is, it's really nice to have friends that are there to support me. And I've got a lot of friends that are always there to support me. I've got people that I can just talk to if I'm feeling down. Some days, people notice on stream, I'm very angry. I'll just get stressed. And that's because there are other things just going on in life. But I'm glad I've got people that I can just talk to just vent. And just, they'll calm me down. They'll assure me that things are fine. But that one thing that happened in my life is pretty much, it's kind of broke me in a way. And, I've not recovered from it still fully. But I'm trying my best to move on. And I'll get there eventually, but I've just got to find ways around it. And gaming, playing with friends, is my main escape from all of this, because it just takes my mind off things. I just feel so much happier when I'm not thinking about it and just having a laugh with everyone. That's pretty much my story. And yeah, I don't know what else I can add on to that.
Thanks for sharing, man. I know it's actually been quite emotional for all of us to share, to be honest. And yeah, everyone has their own journey. And Cash, I've like I said, I'm here for you, and you've got loads of people there for you as well, and that's obviously a massive plus. But what things did you do to kind of make yourself feel better personally when you were going through a dark time?
Just playing games, streaming was one of the things I loved doing, because I could do that because it was at home, I didn't have to leave the house to do it. She was fine with that, but basically I was in my own little world when I'm gaming. I just ignore everything else. I just don't have to bother with dealing with all the crap. I'm just in a happy place when I'm gaming. I can just be as happy as I want. And basically when I stopped, I don't know, I just felt like I wasn't myself, and that whenever I'm gaming, I'm a completely different person. But that's pretty much it. My parents are always there to support me and to help me, to make me feel better. And the one thing that got to me was when I said I was going for the divorce. My parents said to me they didn't approve, but they went with it anyway because they saw how happy I was. And a lot of people do this, but they put on a happy face and they're hiding a lot inside. And I do that a lot. And you've got to do it sometimes, because you don't want to, if people see you're unhappy, it will change the mood and people will probably start to get unhappy as well. But I feel like hiding it isn't always the best option. You got to reach out to people, and that's why I always like talking to friends. My mum and dad are the main people I talk to, because they'll always listen. And they've never given me any, negative feedback either. They'll always push me towards helping me out, making me feel better. They'll always make sure I'm okay. I've always got people asking me pretty much every day if I'm happy or not. And, we're never truly happy, I guess. But I'm working towards it. I'm just glad I've got friends to game with and stuff like that. It's my main getaway. Just online.
Yeah, completely understand. So I kind of knew you when you were going through that dark phase, and I've said this to you personally, but I personally think you've grown so much since that time, and you've come a long way. How do you think that now you're in a much better place than you were, and you realize that you have made that progression, right?
Yeah, definitely. Towards my streaming career, I'd definitely say I've come a long way. I've tried my best through it all. My job is also another thing that I've tried really hard with. I'm trying to push towards that. These are the sort of things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I was still in that relationship. I'm glad I forced myself out of it, because I'm able to move forward and actually do the things that I wasn't able to do. And it's nice to see where I am now, but it's just hard to look back and just think about, if I was still in that relationship, where would I be? And realize that I probably wouldn't be anywhere, really.
Yeah, but you've dealt with it. You're dealing with it now, right? That's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
I completely understand that, gaming is a wonderful distraction and it's great, but alongside your gaming, you were dealing with the issues as well, right? So that's the key. I remember, I know that your routine at your job, really helped you, getting out the house every day, things like that, and, speaking to others on a daily basis. So, you've definitely come a long way. I think you should be quite proud of yourself, personally, as your friend saying that.
I'm going to second that one as well.
Thank you. I've tried. I've tried so hard. Sometimes I'll have bad days where I'll just be really down, but I've always got people to talk to anyway. Ryan's been there to support me a lot. I know you have as well, Rav. I've spoken to you a decent amount as well. We've had our ups and downs, but I can always rely on you guys to help me out and make sure I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, just having that person there where it's not necessarily, it's not a pleasant conversation to have, but they'll always be there for you. That's important. And, I'm sure lots of people do have people around them like that, whether that is family, whether that is friends, or a mixture of both. And, if one of my friends was upset, I'd rather them tell me. I'd be more angry if they didn't tell me than if they did. Than if they didn't, because I'd rather them tell me than they didn't tell me, because that way, I could have helped them get through it, or, maybe just listen to them and try and be there for them. So, yeah, 100%. And, that's why I really appreciate, everyone in this chat, because they're there for me as well. So it's definitely a two-way relationship. If you have the support, use it for sure.
For sure. And I do like the fact that we all have kind of different things that we've dealt with, and it just shows that everyone's different, everyone's gone through different things, and people who are listening may be going through something completely different to us, but they can easily get through it as long as they do what they need to do. It may not happen instantly, obviously, but they will be able to get better, and they need to try and see or find the steps to take and pursue that, for sure.
One thing which we've all said in common is that, the kind of point where everything changed was when we decided to deal with it. In one way or another, we accepted that this was a reality and something needed to happen. So that I think that's probably the biggest point, if people realize that. To do something about it is very powerful, and to realize that is a big step, because, just a few weeks from now, you could be feeling a lot better than you are right now, and you could understand yourself a lot better than you are right now.
For sure. And I think something that sort of ties into that a little bit is sometimes when people are down or not feeling well, or however you want to put it, one of the things that might play through is maybe they deserve to feel this way. And that's something that definitely gets in the way of a lot of people from reaching out and getting help. And just to outline that nobody deserves to be miserable. Nobody deserves to be unheard. Nobody deserves to feel worthless. And just remembering, as a human being, no matter what has happened, you deserve better, and you deserve the opportunity to work on yourself and get to a point where you're no longer feeling that way.
Exactly. 100%. There will be down days and there will be better days. But yeah, if you are feeling low, you can feel better. There is definitely a light at the end of the tunnel if you take the right steps for you personally. And one thing interesting, what Maikeru said, everyone's journey has been completely unique. And this is just four of our journeys, right? Just think there's hundreds of thousands of people that, play RuneScape or are within our community. Everyone has their own journey. And, you may have a unique journey, but you may not be the only person who's felt low, right? And people have come back from it. So, that's important to realize. One thing which is quite unique to all of our situations is that Ryan mentioned it, Maikeru mentioned it, and Cash mentioned it, is that when you stream, people see what you want them to see, kind of like a perfect image, and you have to be like that. That is nothing against you guys. You have to be upbeat, because otherwise people who watch you won't enjoy it. That's just the way it is, right? You have to force that self. And, that's really important. The surface isn't all that it seems, but this doesn't necessarily just apply to streaming. It applies to all forms of social media, right? People portray the best version of themselves wherever they go, right? There's not that much honesty. If someone's going through a tough time, they don't necessarily post about it on Instagram, but if someone's having an amazing time with their perfect relationship, they'll post about it on Instagram, you can be guaranteed. So even though it seems like that on the surface, it's genuinely not like that. Nobody's feeling perfect all the time. So I know that may make people feel like they're alone in feeling down, and the world is happy around them because they're posting wonderful things. But just remember that people see what you want them to see, and that social media genuinely can make you feel quite alone. So take that with a pinch of salt.
I think especially for streaming as well, it's not even, pretending to be someone else, but it's exactly what you said. I know that a lot of people use my content in my stream, to help them deal with, going through a tough time, for example. And if I'm down in the dumps and I'm not having fun, I'm just going to turn the stream off. I'm not going to, I'm not going to put people in my chat who maybe didn't sign up for that through that. And I think one of my big rules of streaming, and I've said it a bunch, not on this specific podcast, but if I'm having fun, people watching are going to have fun as well. So even if I'm going through a very tough time, and I think the other streamers in here can relate to that as well, you want to try and make the most out of it. Try and have as much fun as you possibly can, as that'll make it a more enjoyable experience for the people watching. So it's not so much like, oh, they're going out of the way to hide things. I don't think any of us before going live are like, all right, here are 10 things I don't want to talk about today. It's more just getting yourself in a mindset, reminding yourself why you're there to stream and what you're there to stream.
I 100% agree. It's like, I've had days where I've cancelled streams just because I am not feeling good and I don't want to stream being miserable. You want to promote the positivity. So you want to be positive, so then other people watching will feel positive. It's exactly that. Yeah, I 100% agree. So we have a role to entertain and to, put a smile on people's faces. And if you can't do that one day, it's best to just not stream rather than try and force yourself and others to go through that.
Yeah, completely agree with that, guys. Perfect. So yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. I'm happy to move on to the next section unless you guys want to talk about anything else in this area.
Yeah, I'm game to move on.
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay, guys, so thanks so much for sharing your experiences. Obviously, very, very nice of you to do so, and it's going above and beyond. Honestly, it's going way above and beyond to try and help others, so I really hope that's appreciated by everyone listening. Next up, I think, is quite an important topic which we should touch on, is how to be there for someone who is potentially going through a tough time, and how to listen to them. What can you do as a friend? And the first thing which I would like to mention is that this is a post I saw on Twitter, not a very elegant form of social media, I must admit, but something which I saw was, don't ask someone if they're okay just once. Ask them twice, because at first you may feel like the automatic response is, yeah, I'm fine. But sometimes you may need to dig a little bit deeper to find out if something is really going on. And I found that a lot with my friends. If I ask them once, they'll say I'm just fine. But if you ask them twice, then it really does make a difference sometimes.
Yeah, I think an important part of that too is setting up with an individual, offering to be there for them and not putting a time restriction on it too. Because if you say, hey, do you want to talk about this? And they're not sure, they need to think about it more. Just being very clear that that's not a one-time offer. And it's like, hey, you may not be ready to talk now or you don't want to, but if you're ever feeling like you want someone to reach out to, you don't know where to go, just message me anytime, and just to let them know that it's not a burden on you to, be there and be around. Cause I know a lot of people, they keep these things internal because they don't want to, place a burden on other people. And hopefully with the tips we're going through sort of down this list, we're going to, talk a little bit about that too, and sort of how to absorb possibly negative instances of, people around you without that in turn then getting you down as well.
Yeah, very true. It may be tough conversations to have at some point, right? But, let the other person know that you're willing to be there for them regardless, because they may feel insecure about letting you down by talking to you about something which isn't necessarily happy. So letting them know that, it's okay. I'm here for you. Let's talk about anything. Just tell me what's up.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So the next point that we wanted to kind of make is that, a little bit of kindness goes a very long way. So just an example, like if you reach out to someone you haven't reached out to before, be like, hey dude, I hope you're doing great. And, I'm here if you want to talk to me. And, that's not someone you've spoken to before. That may literally make their day. It just may let them know that you're there for them. It may just be the tipping factor into them being happy for that day or for that moment. So I think being empathetic and, letting people know that, know that you're there for them and things like that, that's also a very nice thing to be doing on a regular basis.
I think sort of one more thing I would add to the same category of just how to help as a friend, as an individual, and just remembering what you're there for. So if someone comes to you and says they're going through a depression or, anything along those lines, just remember that they're not telling you this to, weigh you down with it. They're not telling you this so that you can fix it either. Because I think sometimes we have a predisposition to see a problem and then try and fix it right away and make it go away. And sometimes remember that what you're doing to help them is being there and listening to them and not judging them. And like Rav said, being kind, being empathetic. And I think that's really important to remember as well, because you're not expected as a friend to figure out, what the root cause is, or, try to go through it or make suggestions for things. That's what a professional does. And speaking to a friend is very different from speaking to a professional. And sometimes people need to talk to a friend. They're not looking for a professional.
Yeah, they're not looking for a diagnosis. They just want someone to understand the situation that they're in. And, that's something which Maikeru and Cash really helped me with, is that, they didn't necessarily say, look, you should do this. They were just like, dude, I completely get it. And, it sucks, but I'm here for you. That just kind of understanding, it really does mean the world sometimes. And that's coming from personal experience. I don't know what Mike and Cash have to say about their experiences in this regard.
Yeah, it saves it from me keeping it all bottled up inside. It's nice to know that there's someone there who's willing to listen. Even though I know a lot of people don't really care. They'll just be like, yeah, weren't really paying attention. It's nice that people listen, but it's also nice if people give feedback and just try to help as well. Like, I know Ryan, he does it a lot because he knows what to do. I'm always talking to Ryan about it all, and he's always there to help. But just having someone listening it's really nice, and it's a big relief, so I don't have to keep it all inside.
Second that.
So don't let it fester. That's something which is, I know we're talking about how to be a good listener, but if you are on the other side of it, letting it fester is dangerous. Like, that's when things kind of get out of hand and you can go on a negative spiral. So that's something I've learned through my kind of progression, is that if I do feel something, I won't think twice about just DMing someone or letting someone know. And as soon as I let it out, right, it's literally a problem shared is a problem halved. It means so much to me, and it helps me personally. So that really does make a big difference. If you feel that your friend, is the person you're speaking to, does need help, that you kind of guide them in that way and make them feel at ease to kind of take it.
Yeah. So I think something important there is, it should never be a judgment call of like, do I think my friend who's come at me with an issue needs professional help? I think in general, you always want to recommend it. And you want to help the individual feel, better about that option, whether that's with personal anecdote or just to say, hey, there's no shame, there's no stigma, there's nothing to worry about in terms of doing this. And you're right, there's a decent chance it doesn't turn into anything, but there's also that chance that it makes a really significant difference in the rest of your life. When you're looking at actual professional help, whether it's a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a guidance counselor, whatever it may be, it's pretty easy to find at this point. If you type a city and you type whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it almost immediately. You'll find hundreds of them that come up, and a lot of them as well, because I know this comes up a lot, which is just therapy is very expensive. I'm paying out of pocket, and it's pretty crazy if you don't have some kind of work insurance. But there are a lot of counselors, therapists, psychoanalysts that also do, they'll do a free consultation. So you can come in, you can see if it's a good fit, and then you can have them let you know if they think that you would benefit from, pursuing it long term. So it's not necessarily a situation where if you want to go and get professional help, you need to just throw $100 bills every which way and then, see what calls back. You can really sort of navigate that if you need to as well.
Gotcha. Very good points. Very good points. I think in the UK, you do get put on a waiting list, but get that name there as soon as you can, and you can get it for free. Like, there is free help.
So psychology is free in the UK?
Therapy is free if you need it, I do believe.
That's fantastic. That's so in Canada, only psychiatry is covered.
Yeah.
Where psychology is out of pocket, which is kind of crazy to me. I feel like both
doctor's
are
time.
extremely
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. You do get put on a waiting list. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it does take a while to come through, but you know, if you are out of pocket, there's still a lot of help available to you. There's lots of helplines there, you know, things like that, which I'll try and include in the description of this video.
Yeah,
So-
we'll make sure to put some good resources as well for further reading and for where to go in the description.
Yeah, but you know, if that's like feels a bit too far away, then just talk to a friend in the meantime. Like, that's a really good alternative in the short term. So yeah, there's help available wherever you are. Let me put it that way, in terms of just having a friendly ear. May that be one of us or your family or a friend. There's always someone there to listen and kind of ease the burden. Okay, well, I think we've covered everything. Anything you guys want to touch on before we kind of wrap it up?
No. It would have been the links in the description, but you guys have already said that, so I don't think so.
You guys good? Cash, Ryan?
Yeah, I think everything's pretty well covered. Yeah, just hopefully this, us discussing this openly has been somewhat either educational or helpful to, even if it helps out one person. That's sort of the whole point for doing it, and that's why it's important to talk about mental health. And it's something where, for me personally, I've started doing it more in the last just several months, and hopefully we can see an uptick in people discussing these things if and when they feel comfortable about it.
Absolutely. I think personally for you three, because you do stream regularly, I think if your viewers do listen to it, they will definitely understand you a lot more, which is very important at the end of the day, right? And it's only going to bring up positive conversations from here. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much. Honestly, I think it's pretty rare that the three biggest content creators in our community, in any community, to kind of share their personal experiences and put themselves out there like you guys have done. Honestly, it's quite really, really wonderful thing that you guys have done, and I just hope that people really do appreciate how tough this is. A tough conversation to have. Let's not beat around the bush that it is tough to talk about it, but it needs to be talked about. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure to come on, and yeah, I'm thankful for the invitation, and yeah, hopefully it makes a difference.
Yeah, I agree. It was obviously it's always one of those stigma subjects that we've all discussed and spoke about, and I don't know how well received it will be, but hopefully, like Ryan said, if it helps one person, and that one person may be able to go get help or do another step in the right direction, then that's exactly why we've done this, and that's exactly what it should and hopefully will be used for.
Awesome. So just my kind of closing remark for this is that one thing that we've learned is that there is no shame in working on yourself. If you have something which you feel is getting you down or something you need to deal with, then work on it. Look, we've all done it and we kind of feel better about it. And you probably will too if you start to address it and take it seriously. And kindness goes a very long way. I know we've said that a lot, but it truly, truly does. A friendly ear can make the world of difference. And personally, I think things will get better for you if you do take the help that you need. And lastly, you're not alone. I promise you're not alone. If you feel like you're the only person who's felt low before, you're not. And that's not to take it away from you. That's just to say that people have felt like you have before and come out much stronger. And you probably can too. So hopefully, this has helped you guys. But thank you so much for listening. And in the comments, if you could be kind and sympathetic to all of us here, because like we said, it is kind of a tough subject to talk about. If you feel like sharing, our DMs are open and you're most welcome to tell us how you're feeling at any given time. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. And guys, I'll leave it to you guys to say goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Maikeru out.
I was
Okay.
going to do it. If you weren't going to do it, I was going to do it.
There we go.